Too many things hanging off my face. Good morning. Oh my gosh, my family came. I thought there was no way on earth you guys would get out of bed. Hi, guys. Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Palouse. I am the Reverend Dr. Elizabeth Stevens, and I am just so incredibly lucky to be able to serve this congregation as its minister. We have a couple of brief announcements this morning. We are happy to report that masks are not required, but they're certainly encouraged if they help you feel comfortable, because Whitman County is still in the green zone, as is Latah County. This means we can sing together. If you'd like to know more about our church policy on COVID precautions, it's found on our website. We're asking people to consider volunteering to help with childcare during our Sunday services. It's really fun, and it's a great way to get to know our littlest Unitarian Universalists. Contact Ryan Uri if you'd like to sign up to help. If you are new to the UUCP, or you just would like to know a little bit more about us, the membership committee is hosting a new to UU workshop and light lunch next week on Sunday, August 28th, after the service downstairs in our fellowship hall. There will be time to get acquainted and ask questions as you're introduced to Unitarian Universalism. We'll include a little history, an understanding of our shared values and principles, and an orientation to our congregation. Now, most Sundays, we invite everyone downstairs. In the old days, we'd have coffee and conversation in our beautiful fellowship hall. These days, I think we get refreshments inside and then go outside. Is that right? This is my first day back. Today, there's a special treat during our fellowship hour. We'll have lemonade and iced tea, so do please come on down, get a nice drink. Oh, everything's outside? Everything's outside. Okay. So there end the announcements. We preface our service by acknowledging that the land on which our homes and this church were built was not uninhabited when European settlers arrived here with their ideas of conquest and ownership. For those of us who live in Moscow, Pullman, or other nearby communities, we live on the ancestral homelands of the Nimipu, called Nez Perce by the French-speaking traders, the Palouse, and the Chichumsh, called the Coeur d'Alene. If you're joining us from another place, I encourage you to discover who inhabited or moved through the place where you now live in the times before colonization and genocide. We pause for just a moment to remember that we live on ground that is sacred, ground that was stolen, ground that cries out for justice and for responsible stewardship. May our remembering help us find the courage to do our part to restore wholeness to the earth and all her peoples. We're also going to pause for just a moment and light a candle for peace. Lila, you want to come forward and light our candle for peace? We hold in our hearts all those currently threatened by greed and imperialism, from the people in Ukraine to those in Somalia. And we recommit ourselves to nurturing peace, peace in our hearts and peace in the world. And now let's say together our words of welcome. They'll appear on the screen. Welcome to you, old friends and new, young and old. You are an essential part of our celebration today. Whether today is your first or your 1000th Sunday in our midst, we are stronger because you are with us. We are one people of many identities, origins, sexualities, and genders. We are all growing, all learning, all loved. Body, mind, heart, and spirit, just as you are, You are welcome here. So we're going to take just a moment now to greet one another and acknowledging that we are one gathered community, whether we're here in person or on Zoom. So those of you who are joining us online, please turn on your cameras. And let's have the people online say hello to those of us who are here in person. Okay, and now we're going to have the people in the sanctuary. I'm going to switch to the sanctuary camera. And now you guys wave to the people who are with us on Zoom. Now we're hoping that folks joining via Zoom have a chalice or a candle to light and something to light it with. We're going to all light our chalices at the same time. Matilda, would you please come forward and light our congregational chalice? Please say with me these words. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek and seek to share. I'll have to figure out how to get those words on the screen next time. There they are. And now let's join together in our sung affirmation. From all that dwell below the sky. Thank you. Please be seated. 10 years ago, this week, I preached my first sermon as your settled minister. Bonus points for anyone who remembers what I talked about. Anyone? I was glad to be here, yeah. You're never going to guess. You're never going to guess. I talked about the Higgs boson. That summer, two different teams of scientists working at the Large Hadron Collider at CERN in Switzerland collected data that indicated the presence of a boson that may be the so-called God particle, the Higgs boson. And that was my launching off point for the sermon. I told this really bad joke. I'm so sad it wasn't memorable. A Higgs boson walked into a Catholic church, and the priest says, "Thank goodness you made it. We can't have Mass without you." I went on to touch on many themes that are familiar by this point: radical hospitality, the power of our faith, the human need for story and for community. You know, in some ways, it feels like that was just yesterday. In other ways, it feels like a lifetime ago. We've been through a lot together in this past decade. A great deal has changed, but other things haven't. I still feel incredibly glad to be here, incredibly lucky to be your minister. I still feel humbled by your trust and care. I still look out and see people, look out or look up, and see people who embody the best of what it means to be human. I still know in my bones that this is the place that I belong and that you are the people that I choose to serve. 10 years in, it feels sort of like we never got past the honeymoon phase. So it's good to be back at work after my summer break. It is so good to be in this beautiful new space. But best of all is seeing all of you again in 3 dimensions, no less. So come, let us worship together. And we're going to start with a story. So if the young or the young at heart would like to come forward, we'll have the pictures up on the screen too, but I'm going to read one of my very, very favorites. And one of the ways of understanding that story is to think of it as being about how people deal with big feelings, right? So sometimes big feelings in our body can make us ask mischievous or a little bit wild, and we get ourselves into trouble. And at that point, we have a choice to make. We can either hide from our big feelings, or we can go on the adventure to meet them. In the 10 years that I've been a minister here, a lot of things that have happened that have caused big feelings for me, things that made me sad or scared or really, really angry. And what I love about this church is that we don't hide from our big feelings. We go and meet them, and we go together. That's like when Max gets into his boat and sails to the land of the wild things. And what he finds when he gets there is that he's actually in charge of the wild things, right? He's the king of the wild things, just like we are in charge of our feelings. He also learns that our feelings just need what people need. They need to be seen and acknowledged and loved. That's Max when he plays and rumpuses with the wild things. And then there comes a point where we don't want to play with those big feelings anymore, so we calm ourselves down. That's like Max telling the wild things to stop. My favorite part of the story is when he discovers his supper waiting for him, still hot. This is a reminder that we are always, always loved at this church, and come home here, even if we misbehave sometimes because we have big feelings. So I wonder, when you are feeling big feelings, what helps you calm yourself down? I like to take really deep breaths into my belly. I also love hugs and going for walks in the woods. Yeah, what helps you calm down when you have big feelings? Eating. How about grown-ups? Grown-ups, what helps you calm down when you have big feelings? You have any other good strategies? What? Front. Exercise. Yeah. And I wonder, what are the ways and the places and the people that help you feel safe and loved so that you can relax and feel happy and peaceful? You feel that way at home? Our deepest hope is that you will feel that way here at church too. So thank you for listening and for talking with me. And now we will invite children to go join our RE volunteers. We've got some activities and programs designed for you over in our new RE wing. And let's sing the Reed benediction to send the children on their way. Go in love, our hearts go with you. Go in joy, our hopes go too. Learn in love and grow in wisdom. Shine your light in all you do. And now let's take a moment to engage in the practice of generosity together. For those of you who are able to make a financial contribution, the logistics are on the screen. We'd invite you to either copy down the information you need or simply go to the website to make a donation. For those of you on Zoom, we'll put the web address in the chat. Those of you who are newer or visiting from another part of the country may not be aware that we typically give away all of the cash from our Sunday offering to local charities whose missions align with our values, a program called the Month of Sundays. This month, the recipient is COAST, a division on the Council on Aging and Human Services. COAST is a transportation provider that helps people maintain a quality lifestyle while having the freedom to live in any urban or rural area of choice, regardless of what services are available nearby. If you are donating online, you can choose Month of Sundays from the drop-down menu. And if you're mailing or dropping off a check, simply indicate in the memo line whether it's intended for the Month of Sundays or for our general fund. In the spirit of love and for the continuing work of this church, we'll now take some time to practice generosity together.
they've gone away. I've been sifting through the layers of dusty books and faded pages. There's a story I used to know, what happened long ago, gone away yesterday. Now I find myself on the mountainside, where the rivers change direction across the great divide. Will I hear the owl calling softly as the night was falling? With a question I replied, oh, she's gone across the borderline, gone away yesterday. Now I find myself on the mountainside, where the rivers change direction across the great divide. Finest hour that I have seen is the one that comes between edge of night and the break of day, when the darkness rolls away, gone away yesterday. Now I find myself on the mountainside, where the rivers change direction across the great divide, gone away yesterday. Now I find myself on the mountainside, where the rivers change direction across the great divide.
Thank you so much. So now is the time in our service where we lift up joys and sorrows from the lives of our members and friends. The sharing of joys and sorrows is a sacred ritual for our community. It's a time to acknowledge truly significant life events. The UUCP Worship Committee has suggested that we try some new ways to add this important live connection back into the service. So if you are someone who would rather not share aloud yourself, you can still send any joys and sorrows you have to Ryan, Yuri, and we'll incorporate them into the slideshow and read them aloud and light a candle for you here in the sanctuary. If you're here in person and you have something you'd like to share, you'll shortly be invited to come up and light a candle and speak into the microphone. And if you're joining us on Zoom, here's what we're going to try. If you raise your hand or tell us in the chat that you have something to share, we're going to spotlight your video and invite you to unmute yourself. And someone here will light a candle while you speak. Now, because we haven't done this in a while, I want to offer just a few reminders. This is not a time for announcements or political statements or little mini sermons. Also, there are a lot of us, so it's really important to keep the sharing brief. No more than one sentence, please. And we're going to continue with the practice we started when we were on Zoom of keeping the sequence of sharing sorrows separate from the joys. So we start with the sorrows. So I invite you now to go ahead and get comfortable. Take a few deep breaths and check in your heart. Sorrow comes into every life. Each of us suffers losses and setbacks. Each of us struggles and sometimes knows defeat. So together we create a circle of compassion that's pain in our lives. If you have a sorrow or a concern to share, I'd invite you to come forward or let us know if you're joining us on Zoom. So this morning's meditation is a guided one, sort of a thought experiment. So go ahead and get yourselves comfortable. Maybe close your eyes if you'd like. Maybe relax your neck and shoulders. Try slowing down and deepening your breathing just a touch if that feels good and right. Now imagine you are sitting in a place that feels completely safe and comfortable. You are at home there. There's no pressure from outside forces. There's no pressure from inside voices. And into that space walks the person that you were 10 years ago. Greet them and invite them to sit with you for some conversation. How are they doing? What are they facing that's challenging or hard? What are the things that give them joy? What are the things they are learning? Bring them up to speed on everything that's happened in the last 10 years. The great thing about talking with ourselves and our imagination is these exchanges can happen lightning fast. How does that make them feel? Are they surprised or shocked? Sad or disappointed? Angry or frustrated? Relieved? Excited? Whatever they are feeling, just be with them, compassionate and accepting. And then maybe have a conversation between you and your past self, the you of 10 years ago, about how you've changed in the last 10 years. Your perspectives or habits or ways of being, your mental or emotional state, your understanding of life, your unique way of being human. Ask yourself, what are the through lines? What are the things that you recognize in this former you that are still an essential part of you in the present? When you are ready, say goodbye to this new old friend and release them back into the past gently. Return to the present, perhaps opening your eyes, maybe moving around just a little bit. We human beings are endlessly fascinating. There are so many different ways to grow and become. So let's bow our heads briefly together in gratitude for the gifts of life, learning, and love. Amen, and blessed be. Oh. I did not know that was coming. Oh boy. Oh, that was Ginger, wasn't it? It was, yeah. Ginger and Sam. Oh boy. So our reading this morning is by one of my favorite poets, Denise Levertov. It's called The Secret. Two girls discover the secret of life in a sudden line of poetry. I don't know the secret wrote, I don't know the secret. I who don't know the secret wrote the line. They told me through a third person they had found it, but not when it was, not what it was, not even what line it was. No doubt by now, more than a week later, they have forgotten the secret, the line, the name of the poem. I love them for finding what I can't find and for loving me, for the line I wrote and for getting it so that 1,000 times till death finds them, they may discover it again in other lines, in other happenings. And for wanting to know it, for assuming there is such a secret. Yes, for that most of all. So the me of 10 years ago was excited and curious and a little bit nervous. From what she could tell, this was a great congregation whose priorities were a good fit for her gifts and interests, but she knew she'd been in ministry long enough to know that there's always potential for weird dynamics, toxic personalities, things to surface over time that can harpoon a ministry, even a ministry that started with good intentions and so much promise. Now, she was pretty sure that she had the skill and the experience to serve well and be successful, but she also had a fairly recent lupus diagnosis, and she was a little nervous about whether she'd have the energy and physical resilience for full-time ministry. Meanwhile, her first settlement, while ostensibly successful, had had some nasty conflicts, and she thought it wasn't all about her, but she wasn't entirely certain. She was worried that her family wouldn't like living in Moscow. She said to herself, while getting ready that very first morning, well, if this doesn't work out, I can always go back to school and become a nurse midwife. Her office was up there, 2 steep flights of stairs away from the bathroom, which turned out to be kind of a problem, especially when her lupus was flaring and her knees were sore. She was renting a house on C Street, a really sweet craftsman, and a 5-minute walk to the church. She loved that house at first. She didn't realize that in October, she'd wake up to find her landlord's picture on the front page of the paper after he was arrested for molesting his 16-year-old daughter. She also didn't know that a crisis in her extended family would result in her becoming the primary caregiver for her ill alcoholic father after he moved to Pullman. So it was an eventful year, my first year with you, pretty challenging on that personal level. But as far as ministry went, it was smooth sailing. The search committee, many of whom are here, I think you guys should stand up. It's your fault. Thank you. Thank you for choosing me. The search committee transitioned and became my first committee on ministry. And at my request, they arranged for a series of circle suppers held in people's homes. Do you guys remember those? Do people here remember those? Yeah. I got to meet almost everyone in an intimate enough setting that I could remember names and stories. and everyone got to meet me. I think it was a good way to begin to establish trust, and I've recommended it to the many new ministers I've mentored in the years since. There were some challenging events that first year. Sandy Hook in December. Remember when we thought that would shift the conversation on common sense gun control? But overall, things were good. Life was good. In the spring of that first church year, we had Music Sunday. John Anderson put together a trio, myself, April Rubino, and Terry Grabelski. We sang a cover of a Wailing Jenny's tune, Apocalypse Lullaby. There were a couple of moments when we were singing that felt really magical to me. So after the service was over, I asked the two of them if they'd have any interest in continuing to make music together on a semi-regular basis. They agreed. And we got together every week. Singing with those two extraordinary women became a highlight of my life for the next 2 years. The music stopped in January of 2015, as it did for all of the many musicians who had the privilege of jamming with Terry G. The phone call from Donna Holmes Parks giving me the news about the shooting is seared in my memory and always will be. The days and weeks that followed were intense. I remember feeling both completely devastated and absolutely focused. There are really no right words to say, no right things to do in the wake of that kind of trauma. And yet somehow I found words. I did things. I worked hard, taking care of everybody else. And the only space I gave myself to grieve was 3 o'clock in the morning each night when I'd sit with my guitar and cry. In a way, I think that the role as your minister was a gift for me in that time. I had a reason to compartmentalize. I had a clear job to do. The flip side of that particular gift is that it took a long time for me to do my own mourning and healing. My dad died the next year in 2016. I bet you all remember what else happened in 2016. In the days leading up to the election, as ugly as the campaign had been, I bought champagne in anticipation of celebrating the election of our first female president. Putting that bottle back into the cabinet is another memory that's seared into my brain. The days after the election were almost as hard as those after the shooting. In fact, some people said they felt a similar sense of loss. We did another round of circle suppers. Remember those? We wanted to give everyone a chance to process. And in that process, our mission became even clearer. In a post-Trump world, our capacity to work for and embody our values of compassion, equity, justice, and love in the world just felt more vital and necessary than ever. Meanwhile, we were slowly working through a process of discernment around our building. I am very proud of how inclusive and reflective and kind that process was. Conversations about the limitations of the building had begun even before my first day 10 years ago, but they tended to run aground between the Scylla of disagreements about where and what to do and the Charybdis of scarcity thinking, how could we possibly afford to do anything at all? It truly was a leap of faith to embark on this particular adventure, but we were able to do so together. Clear-eyed, open-hearted. In November of 2018, I got another one of those phone calls you need to be sitting down for, this one from Michael Irvin. Donald Wilkinson's death occurred when I was on the East Coast supporting my mom after my stepdad's death. It was awful. But later that day, I got what I considered to be my single greatest professional compliment. See, we had trained and commissioned our lay pastoral ministers just a week or two before, so they were one of my first calls after getting the news about Donald. Do you need me to fly back? I asked. No, said, I think Krista Kramer. You need to be with your mom. You've taught us what to do in situations like this. We can hold the space until you get here. And they did. And they did it beautifully. In 2019, I took my sabbatical I did some of that deferred grieving, came back refreshed, healed, enlivened, with a couple extra letters after my name. I came back and we were moving full steam ahead with the building project. But then just as we were gearing up to start making a plan for what we'd do during construction, the pandemic hit. Now, I'll be honest, pandemic ministry, not much fun. We worked so hard to weave community online and outdoors, masked and socially distanced. But there are things that happen when we're together in person that just don't happen when we're not physically present with and to one another, even in limited ways. The controversy over masking was surprising and stupid and destructive. We were forced into this way of seeing other humans as disease vectors. And that fear, the fear of getting sick, the fear of getting other people sick, the fear of losing people we loved, it was just ever present. It was so stressful. It was in this context that I weathered the loss of 3 family members, an aunt, an uncle, and my grandmother, and the breakup of my 30-year marriage. Now, I was taught in seminary that you want to let your congregation know you've bled, but you never want to let them see you bleed. I interpreted that as a directive to keep my pain and grief and stress completely separate and outside the congregational system, which worked just fine for a very long time. But somewhere mid-pandemic, before the vaccine came out, something shifted in me. I realized I wasn't doing anyone any favors, least of all myself. I began to wonder and write and meditate and talk with colleagues and my therapist about whether there might be a way to be more vulnerable and honest without crossing professional boundaries. The answer was yes. And so I started being more open with you all. I shared more about how the losses and stresses were impacting me. I hope I didn't overshare. It felt strange, but also healthy. I noticed relationships deepening, and I discovered in myself a deeper resilience and a resurgent sense of joy. Being in it with you got me through it. The me I am now feels a lot more transparent than the me I was 3 years ago and more authentic. I think I'm stronger and softer. I've got a few fewer filters. But I also have access to this seemingly bottomless well of compassion and patience that I didn't even know was there. As the pandemic limped on and construction on our building progressed, there were a lot of Monday staff meetings where, I'm not going to lie, we mostly talked about how tired we were, or we struggled to find inspiration for the next week's worship. It was quite humbling to realize how much I depend on the energy that comes back to me on Sunday mornings when we're able to be together in person. I don't want the folks who are joining us online to feel like second-class citizens, but there's a way in which just preaching to that little dot on my laptop feels like I'm pouring life and love into a black hole, which is why I kept crying last June too at our first hybrid service. It's such a relief to just have some people in the room again. You know, if I were to go back and tell the Elizabeth of 10 years ago what was coming, I worry a little she might have decided to become a nurse midwife after all. There was a lot of stress and trauma and heartbreak. But then again, I think I might be underestimating her. See, even when we started on this journey together, I knew, at least intellectually, that the big hard things are also some of the most important things in terms of forging our identity, in terms of our process of becoming. As the first noble truth of Buddhism states, life is suffering. There's no getting away from the big hard things. However, having a community of people around us makes it possible to not just get through the big hard things, but to grow through the big hard things. See, for every story about loss and trauma, and there are quite a few more that I didn't bring up this morning, I probably have at least 50 I could tell about moments of joy and laughter, compassion and connection and fun. And all of these stories collectively weave into one big story that demonstrates how we become wiser and stronger and more resilient when we're brave enough to be real, to be with the big feelings and the hard things, and to stay. When things were hard, we came together. We listened, we loved, we learned. When things were good, we came together. We played, we laughed, we learned. My friend and colleague Jocko Tenhove says church is essentially a place where we talk about things that matter with people who care. That simple act of talking honestly about things that are important with people who are committed and compassionate is utterly transformative. It may even ultimately be what saves us. It's certainly what saved me. And that is why I am a minister. And I am your minister because you get it. You aren't afraid to go to the wild places. You know how to rumpus. And there's certainly no shortage of soup and sweets waiting in the aftermath. After every disruption, there's this beautiful return to safety, connection, acceptance, gratitude, and love. The secret to life is that the secret to life changes and evolves in response to circumstances. We see that and we sense it and we grab hold of it most clearly when we're in the presence of trusted others who help us face what's there and then move through it to what comes next. I am so grateful for all of it. Every last second of the last 10 years. And if in those years I have given you back even a fraction of what you've given me, then I know that my time and my life has been well spent. So onward, my friends. I love you so very, very much. So be it, and blessed be. Our closing hymn is Life Calls Us On.
Here in reverence now we gather for the blessing we have known, with a pledge to one another that we journey not alone. Joy and sorrow make us one.
Time wants to show you a different country. It's the one that your life conceals, the one waiting outside when curtains are drawn, the one grandmother hinted at in her crochet design, the one almost found over at the edge of the music after the sermon. It's the way life is, and you have it a few years given. You get killed now and then, violated in various ways, and sometimes it's turnabout. You get tired of that long suffering. You wait and pray, and maybe good things come. Maybe the hurt slackens and you hardly feel it anymore. You have a breath without pain. It's called happiness. It's a balance, the taking and passing along, the composting of where you've been and how people and weather treated you. It's a country where you already are, bringing where you have been. Time offers this gift in its millions of ways, turning the world, moving the air, calling every morning, here, take it, it's yours. Let's join together in our sung benediction. There is a love. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all I rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all we rest in this love. We rest in this love. We rest in this So we chose that at the beginning of the pandemic. This is the song that we wanted stuck in your head if you were in the hospital and we couldn't visit you, if you were sad and alone and couldn't have somebody come to be with you. We wanted you to remember and hear this in your sleep. Did it work? Good, good. Because there is a love, and it's not about me and it's not about you. It's not about us. It's so much bigger and vaster than any of that. And we can trust it and we can rest in it and we can be the physical representation of that love for and with one another. Let me tell you, there's no better place on earth. So go in peace. Have a good week. We'll see you next week, either online or here in the room. And please join me in the words for extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this chalice, that it might glow gently in our hearts. May it light our paths as we leave this place. May it light our way until we are together again. Thank you. Thank you so much. Go in peace.